This is the last chapter of Unit 3, Chapter 11, and it's basically the 1970s. And what we'll find here is the book talks about how there's a shifting of culture now, and that it goes from that anti-establishment type of a feeling to more of a materialistic era in the 70s. There's also this feeling of nostalgia for older days, including this fascination with the 50s, and we get TV shows like Happy Days and movies like Grease or American Graffiti. And it's also a time towards the end of the last decade and the beginning of the 70s where we have this depressing array of popular music deaths. There's a huge list of it on page 369. In 1975, a third of the music that was being sold was on tape, like cassette tape or 8-track. We're still pre-CD at this time. There were only a few huge corporations, 6 corporations that had about 80% of the industry's money. There were some megastars like listed up there. Well, not a whole lot of them, but there are like Paul McCartney, Elton John, Stevie Wonders. But the smaller labels and smaller artists pretty much struggled in the first half of this decade. Got better later on. Test question will be about the genres of this era, which included pop rock, adult contemporary, singer-songwriters, soft soul, country pop, bubblegum, disco, and for the first time, a genre called oldies. And in your book, page 371, there's a bunch of artists that are related to each one of these styles, and you should make a list of it because it's going to be a test question. There's a big long list of songs to listen to right on that page. Also, it's basically a jukebox of all these different kinds of styles, and I put a list of the listening on Blackboard too, so you can kind of cross-reference that. The book then talks about country music and its change. It's going a couple of different ways. It tends to go a little more pop mainstream, and then there's another style, a new style called hardcore country. Some books call it redneck country, but it's basically going back to old style country, a little bit more well, just maybe authentic or just in an older fashion. And we have Merle Haggard is the guy that they kind of focus on a little bit. And if you've never heard the song Okie from Muskogee, you should go listen to it. It's pretty funny. The Grand Ole Opry started in 1941 way back, but at this time in 1974 it moved to Opryland. They took the stage and moved it to a bigger venue because there's just so many people that were wanting to come to Opryland that the old theater just couldn't hold it. We have a lot of crossovers from country that are very popular in rock era, and especially John Denver and Glenn Campbell. But there's others there: Charlie Rich, C.W. McCall, Dolly Parton, Olivia Newton-John. Some of those names you probably know. Some of them are gone, and yeah, for the most part, if you'll take a look in the book and just see how they were successful and why they did better, you'll see why, frankly, these artists annoyed traditional country fans just because they were more catering towards the popular side of music, especially Olivia Newton-John. If you look at her, after she started doing some movies, John Denver did some movies and basically did less country and more pop. Now, in just the very traditional rock era, the book calls it more of a rock comes of age thing. And this is where we have a couple of new styles, glam rock and prog rock. And they've still been hanging in there just because of their of the newness and the interest that it created. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of David Bowie. Just died recently. Glam is short for glamorous, and he put on some shows back in the 70s that were he looked very different back then. I encourage you to take a look in the book at that and see how that was different. Prog rock, prog is short for progressive, and it involved more intellectual type of music, I would say. Heck, half of the music didn't have lyrics. It was more about, again, putting on a show. Glamorous or glam rock was more fun and entertaining, spaceships and giant spiders from Mars kind of a thing. Prog rock was more subtle and maybe a little darker also. Pink Floyd is your seminal group for that. Dark Side of the Moon. I still see lots of people wearing those T-shirts and hats with the album cover. As a matter of fact, probably has the record, and that album came out in 1973, and it was in the top 100 LP charts for 14 years. 14 years. Um, just an amazing production, and there's a lot of great stories about that if we were in class, I would tell you all about them. We have a lot of groups now that don't necessarily fit into one group or another, but are known for doing these great stadium type shows. Big things like Styx, Journey, Led Zeppelin, Kansas, Rush, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. If you don't know any of these musicians, they've all had one or two hits that you probably heard, especially Journey. If we were in class again, we'd all be singing songs by Journey. And that's where rock is going. There are less of these small bands and these big productions that you will see. The book also talks some about Marvin Gaye, who's in the next section. And these are popular artists that basically followed in the footsteps of Hendrix. They include Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, George Clinton, who we'll talk more about a little bit later on. And Marvin Gaye, 1971, What's Going On was his big hit. And his was a little bit different. Marvin Gaye, he did more social commentary than maybe some of the others. The listening at this time is around here is Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, which in some books people consider the greatest rock song of all history, but that's just one person's opinion. Also, in the Latin vein, we have Santana that's in there, and you've probably heard that song that's in there, but give it a listen to. It makes for a really nice listening test question also. Southern rock is another style of rock and roll, and again, this is kind of a border thing. It's like, is it rock and roll? Is it country? It's a little hard to tell. People will argue all the time. This includes Leonard Skinner, the Allman Brothers, Charlie Daniels Band, which I think is way more country than rock, but it's still got electric and drums and whatnot, so you might have that. CCR stands for Creedence Clearwater Revival. Again, good music to listen to, and you should take a listen to. The chapter then at this time basically ends with the rise of disco, and boy, did that cause problems with people. Disco is the precursor to what we call now techno or house music, and even hip-hop to some degree. Basically, people want music to dance to, and disco certainly gave that. It's not really high art. You have 15-minute songs that have a pulsing beat and repetitive sounds, and it's basically just designed for dancing. The songs that you're going to listen to in there are like from Donna Summer and the Bee Gees, they don't have any Village People in there, which is terrible. We need to all sing YMCA in class, or any of the other songs they had. Nowadays, the Village People would never do well just because there's too many politically incorrect things going on with that. But you'll be listening to Love You, Baby, and I believe a song by Chic. But let me see. A good test question is, why did disco do so well? And I believe I've got it right there. It's basically coming out of the Motown soul and funk sounds, which is very popular at the time. There's also this big interest in social dancing, discotheques or discos, and especially as the gay community was starting to come out more, it actually kind of centered around that a whole lot as far as the discotheques. just as a place to go out dancing. But not just that; it was just pretty much everyone. The book says it's just in general, the middle class of America wanted places to go dancing. The technology references the fact that we don't need bands to do disco. You could have a synthesizer and a drum machine and a DJ, and with one person and a couple of machines, you could fill up a room with dance music. The Hollywood films of the time, like Saturday Night Fever, and I'm trying to remember some of the others, but you had a bunch of movies in the disco era, and if you'll take a look in the book, it'll list some of that. And the economic recession tie-in is right there with technology. The 70s, much like just recently, we had a downturn in the economy, and hiring a band cost a lot more than hiring one guy with a lot of equipment, a DJ. And so that was just another reason why disco rose in popularity. Was all of these reasons. It was just a great time. Some people really hated disco, and there's some articles in your book that talk about how much they hated it and what they did. But everybody was getting on the bandwagon, even people like Barbra Streisand, who was mainly known for doing oldies type music standards and Broadway musicals. She put out a disco album, and it actually did very, very well at the time. So listen to that music, have some fun. We're getting to more and more modern music, and then we will start the final chapter or the final unit. Thank you.